Hey, in this video, I want to walk you through exactly how I lose weight on a plant-based diet. This is the blueprint that got me in, I think at least, my best shape ever. I love this lifestyle. It's been amazing for me. Same time, it isn't a silver bullet or a magic pill. It doesn't mean automatic weight loss just by virtue of being plant-based, and you may well have figured this out the hard way. So today, what I want to walk you through is 10 steps that I think have really been the proverbial game changer for me on the scales. Very quickly though, before that meal of the day, if you're new, this is what we do just to give some plant-based meal ideas and inspo here. And it's the yog bowl today. The yog bowl has been a main feature of the old diet this year. Love these. So I've got some, I don't know if you're going to see all the ingredients, but soy yogurt, got frozen sour cherries here, which are amazing, frozen blueberries, some quick oats. We've got a tablespoon or so of hemp seeds here. This is looking like maca powder here. This beigey, camely looking colored stuff is actually ground cinnamon. It's just a bit of ground cinnamon. And then lathered in the old maple syrup as well. So these are an amazing way to start the day. And actually one of the hacks that I'm going to cover in this video here, but more on that in a second. Step number one that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet, not to start out with the glaringly obvious, it might sound trite at this point, but I base 90% of my meals on whole plant foods, and I'm not perfect, but for the most part, those vegan junk food products and all the meat substitutes, so it depends what you mean, but I keep those largely anyway at bay. Why? Because they tend, keyword, tend to have, you will find exceptions, they tend to have a much greater caloric density, so there's more calories per gram or ounce, so you can't get as full and satisfied. In other words, you can't eat as much per calorie. That's an obvious risk, isn't it, from a weight loss perspective? Then, not to mention the saturated fat content in some of these things. It might not be at the same level as like red and processed meats, but it's getting up there. I have concerns about that from a cholesterol and heart health perspective, definitely. And it's also, I kind of talked about fullness and satiety there just a second ago, but it's also that as well. It's like, even if I'm to fit these things into my diet, they don't make me half as full and satisfied per calorie as maybe a cleaner whole food source, like maybe like something like black beans or lentils, even tofu, which is technically processed, but I certainly don't consider a junk food. So yeah, just the calorie per satisfaction ratio, if that was ever a metric, I don't think is that good. So the whole plant foods, all of that fiber content, the low caloric density lets me feel really full whilst maintaining that all-important calorie deficit to lose body fat. I'm not perfect with this, like I say, like I'm always transparent about in my videos, but 90% seems the sweet spot for me between healthy, structured, whole foods with just that little bit of rule-bending ability, that little bit of flexibility to where like this feels realistic and I can indulge and have a treat from time to time, but it's, you know, kind of restrained to a small part of my diet. Step number two that helped me get in my best shape ever on a plant-based diet, I don't much care for this idea of superfoods. And whilst there are foods with a particularly noteworthy, of course, nutrition content, I do think the superfoods idea is largely overplayed. Having said all of that, if there was one food that ideally I knew I would be able to eat for the rest of my life, it would be to have this rule: 1 cup of berries daily. And for the large part, I've actually done that, adhered to that. I would say 96, 97% of the time for the last 10 years. It's been brilliant for me because I love berries, number one, but also, again, to talk about caloric density, one of the best fruits one of the best fruit categories, anyway, under the greater fruit and fresh produce umbrella for calorie density, particularly amazing in this regard. Blueberries in particular I like for all the nutrients they contain, but just this rule of like 1 cup of berries daily for that little bit of sweet fix, but also very low caloric density. Berries don't have like a moorishness for me personally that maybe other fruit like mango and grapes do, where I can just go, and I still, even though they're very healthy, I still have to be quite cautious with my portion control. Berries don't really necessarily have this effect on me. So there is also a wider health and well-being element, especially with something like blueberries, all the vitamins. I am thinking about that too. But strictly from a weight loss perspective, the calorie density of berries, it's great, and I can just throw them into so many different dishes, like the yog bowls. Step three that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet, I aim for at least 2 servings of legumes per day. So of course, the beans, the lentils, peas, technically chickpeas since they're not a bean as well. But I'm also including, maybe somewhat contentiously, the likes of tofu and tempeh in this category. And there is some infighting, albeit not as much as maybe 5 years ago anyway. I think the debate is largely settled, but there is some infighting in the plant-based community about, oh, should we really talk about sort of tofu and tempeh as a healthy legume, given that processed, there's still some, you know, some different arguments about soy. For me personally, it's my damn video. The debate is settled, and I'm happy with these things in my diet, and I think they're a wonderful addition to my diet. Why do I like the legumes so much that I make sure that rarely a day passes where I don't have 2 servings of them over the course of the day? One, the obvious, very cliched benefit that always gets cited in these videos is a good source of plant protein. But you know what it is for me? You know, this, again, the big thing, I'm going to repeat a lot of the same themes here because these are the things that I see as being quite critical to success on the scale. But the calorie content to satisfaction ratio of beans and lentils in particular, this is where I think they outperform tofu and tempeh, which perform well in other areas. But beans and lentils in particular, their calorie to satisfaction ratio is incredible. The fullness that I can get from just adding half a can of beans, sometimes I do a full can, but half a can of beans, 120 grams of beans, maybe 2/3 a cup to my meals is incredible. I just get so full from beans. And so, again, you can imagine the advantage of this from a weight loss perspective, especially given their relatively low caloric density. Something like red kidney beans have such a low caloric density. At the more upper end, you've got soybeans and chickpeas that have a slightly higher caloric density. But we're not talking about a great deal. These I still consider a low calorie food. So to get all the fiber, all the subsequent satisfaction from such a low calorie food, to hit a little bit of extra protein as well, and I like the taste too. I just think they're a perfect complement to so many savory meals on a plant-based diet. Step number 4 that helped me get in my best shape ever on a plant-based diet: no ludicrous restriction of a whole macronutrient a la carbohydrates, protein, and fat. There is so much debate about this, with the ketoers saying, no, carbohydrates are the problem. They're the reason why people are getting obese nowadays. And then, of course, you've got the high-carb plant-based dieters in my community that say things like the fat you eat is the fat you wear. No, fat is the cause of obesity. That's the big issue. That's the whole enchilada. Of course, I've made my views on this crystal clear. I think they're both equally wrong. I do, to equal measure. And what I've learned, this very much is not profound, it conforms with the consensus, is that actually this is all trumped. This whole debate is trumped by simply being in a calorie deficit. And that is the most important thing to get right on the scales. And so, in other words, as long as you're in a calorie deficit, this is what I'm saying quite bluntly, it doesn't so much matter your ratios between the macronutrients. What I'm certainly not for, though, is the intentional ostracizing of any one macronutrient, because I think they all bring different things to the party. They can, to some degree, some macronutrients compensate for one another. That's a different video. And I don't simultaneously think you need exactly the same. I don't think you need all 3 macronutrients, carbs, protein, and fat in equal measure, for the record, like 33% carbs, 33% protein, 33, etc., etc. I'm not an advocate for equal measure with our macronutrients, but the idea of ostracizing any one of them, when I feel there's things that they independently benefit the body via some of their properties, I don't like it, and I just know that I feel my best self when most of my meals, maybe I'm not perfect all the time with this, but most of my meals have a good source of carbs, protein, and fat. That's when I feel my best, my most satisfied. And I understand that is not going to impede weight loss unless I'm not in a calorie deficit. Sorry for the double negative. Step 5 that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet. Do you recall at the start I was talking about the yogurt bowl? I said there's a particular weight loss hack I want to come back to. It's this. This is actually something I've learned this year. Despite being plant-based for 10 years, this is something that's helped me just lean down a little further over the summer months in particular this year. And it's desertifying a lot of my meals, which was an idea I heard years and years ago. Like, take your favorite meals, make them low calorie, make them healthy, maybe veganize them, and it can be a great way to enjoy some of your favorite sweet treats on a healthier lifestyle. And I was just like, nah, I don't really need that. I kind of like fruit. I just eat some fruit when I've got sweet cravings. And that has stood me really well in the past. But this is the first year where I've gone big on yogurt bowls. What else? We've done the plant protein sludge. you know, with all the fruit and some nut and seed toppings that I've talked about in other videos before. I've been doing my chocolate mug cakes as well recently, which I'm falling in love with. And I virtually, raspberries on top, amazing, a little bit of stevia. I virtually have I can't say completely, because I'm a human, I like a damn almond croissant. So middle class, as I'm always joking about. Almond croissant, yes. I love them. But virtually, not completely, but virtually no cravings this year. And I think there's many variables that have contributed to that, no doubt. In large part, though, it's because I'm having like a desserty kind of meal every day or every other day. It just really hits the spot. No, it's not the same as sticky toffee pudding or an almond croissant. It's not quite as rich and intense. I don't mean to say it's the same feeling. Obviously, it's a healthier version. But stuff like this has honestly been, again, it's trite. I hate the term almost, even though I've used it several times in this video. Game changer for me, it has. Cravings are so low, and it's just allowed me to find another level of consistency this year. So desertifying lots of my meals, still staying in the calorie deficit, keeping the calories low, amazing. Step number 6 to help me get in my best shape ever on a plant-based diet. We've talked exclusively about nutrition throughout, and rightly so, because it's a video about plant-based diets. But one of the criticisms I've often leveled at my fellow teachers and coaches in the plant-based community is, hey, why is no one talking about exercise here? We're also food-focused, and to a degree, of course, rightly so, and I would agree with the argument that nutrition is going to have the most impact on risk factors for major chronic disease and fixing obesity, etc., versus the exercise component. Totally agree. But still, exercise I still consider to be absolutely crucial from not just a weight loss perspective, but certainly a wider health, physical and mental health, by the way, but health and well-being perspective. And that's why for me, I'm really ardent on getting steps in daily, walking daily, even if it was just 4,000 steps. I don't want a day, and that's very easy for me because I live in a city and I'm kind of walking around anyway. I don't own a car at the moment. And so that's kind of a low bar for me, and that might change. I'm not saying 4,000 steps is a magic target for you at home. That would be really random, arbitrary, generic advice. But just having some kind of focus on every day I'm going to walk, every day I'm going to do a little, especially the more sedentary you are, every day I'm just going to do a little bit of walking, whatever it is. And sometimes there's phases in the past 18 months, 2 years, where I've said to myself, okay, you're doing 8,000 steps for the next 30 days. You're doing 10,000. Not a challenge as such, but let's say a minimum target. And I'll often go over that, thankfully. That makes it easier. But just having that minimum target, just that emphasis on every day I'm moving, I'm walking, and it doesn't have to be intense. I just start with walking only. I do think, I am a believer that, at a certain point, it's nice to graduate to things that raise the heart rate more so and offer all sorts of cardiovascular benefits, to maybe stretch yourself into some strength training as well, which has all sorts of benefits that the more cardiovascular promoting movements cannot, or don't do quite as well. So I actually think that a multifaceted, again, I'm not saying anything particularly new or profound here, I actually think the best case scenario, I'm not perfect with this myself, is having a really multifaceted exercise routine where there's lots of walking, and that's the foundation, just as your daily movement. And then a couple of times a week, you're doing a little bit of sort of more gentle cardio, maybe once a week you do something slightly more intense from a cardiovascular perspective, but there's also a little bit of strength training once to twice a week mixed in there. And then ideally, and this is where I fall flat actually and I'm not so perfect, but there's some kind of mobility and flexibility work with something like a yoga or a Pilates, or just a basic routine. It doesn't have to be fancy, a basic routine that you do at home. I think that's what you build up to, but rather that can be quite overwhelming for folks that are very sedentary. So that's why I always say, look, just start with walking, low-hanging fruit mentality, just get out, have the intent. You don't even need a step target like I perhaps suggested. Just give yourself the target of, I'm gonna move every day, I'm gonna do some kind of walking every single day, and then you can build up in time. Step number 7 that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet. Back to the nutrition stuff now. The ideal meal structure for me. I know there's lots of conversation about meal timing and frequency, and intermittent fasting is certainly not as popular as it was 10 to 12 years ago, but I do occasionally get questions about my stance on that. What I've landed on, and there's different merit to different arguments, and some things are overplayed. People that argue for OMAD, 1 meal a day, I think that's maybe too far. But again, you can still get good results with it, I concede. And I don't agree with lots of the fear mongering about having long periods where you're fasting. But at the same, so I agree with like the intermittent fasters, the OMADers, and lots of things is what I'm trying to say. But what I've landed on as a personal preference, because I've seen that this is actually the best thing overall, I think, for my compliance. And there are moving goalposts there. Maybe next year, something else, a different meal structure is better for my compliance. But anyway, cut to the chase, spit it outright. I am just the most boring 3 meals a day guy. I have 3 meals a day, a couple of snacks in between those meals. That's what we do on Slim and Sustain for my clients as well. And it just, for the vast majority of people, this is what works for me, but the vast majority of people I observe as well, this works best for them. In terms of their daily routine, in terms of the distribution of satisfaction over the course of the day, there aren't long stretches of time where they're not eating to save calories for later on, which I don't want to poo-poo too much, I don't want to rubbish too much, because there is a little bit of merit in that. I do understand those arguments, but what I've found is just an equal distribution-ish, equal-ish, of calories over the course of the day. This is what, for me personally, gives me the least risk of screwing it up, of binging, of ever getting to such a hunger weak point that I'm likely to make a mistake. This perfectly fits my lifestyle, my routine. So this is what I've landed on is, again, the calories are going to be the most important thing. If you want to lose weight right now on a plant-based diet or whatever else, you need to be in a calorie deficit. Get that right first. Under that, the question of meal timing and structure, whether you eat 5 small meals per day, 3 big meals, a couple of snacks like I do, whether there's no snacks or lots more snacks, whether you skip breakfast and do intermittent fasting, all of this, in other words, is usurped by being in a calorie deficit. My point here, and step number 7 is, for me, the ideal structure to stay happily, or most happily, in that calorie deficit. 3 big meals a day. I love it. Step number 8 that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet. What about meals out? Do I need to avoid those? Well, me personally, I've spoken a lot in recent months on this channel about real-world flexibility and how it's really hard to build the kind of plan, the kind of diet that you're glad to follow for life and it still gets really good health results. If you're completely scared to ever eat out, simultaneously at the other end of the spectrum, if you're eating out every day, that's going to be a real disadvantage to you from a health perspective as well. So like, what is the balance there? Well, I like this idea of bending the rules without breaking them. I like this idea of flexibility, but I can't lie to you guys. It's most controlled. I get my fastest results when I'm limiting myself to 1 meal out per week. And of course, maybe I'd have even better results if it was no meals out per week. Of course, it depends what that 1 meal off plan, quote unquote, is. I'm not talking about a cheat meal either, ideally, anything too indulgent. But, you know, obviously that's where I'd get my best results, but I want some real world flexibility. And I think in periods where my life is quite calm and there's not too much going on and it's not too busy, which for me, thankfully, is the vast majority of the time, things are under control. I'm not perfect with it, but things in my life are mostly under control right now, thankfully. Eating 1 meal out per week is actually a very reasonable compromise. It's something I can really agree to. That's when I'll get my best results. Because yes, I've shared so many tips for this. You can eat out and still be in that calorie deficit. You could technically eat out, to maybe step on my previous idea, you could actually eat out every day and still be in a calorie deficit. I did it for months in Asia last year, or it was at least at calorie maintenance or thereabout in Asia last year. I did this for 5-6 months where I was traveling last year. But it's hard and it's far less guaranteed, like the most controlled way, 1 meal out per week, to limit yourself to that and to channel all of your desire for something a little bit different or a bit more indulgent to that 1 meal. That just allows 20 other good meals per week, right? And what that does as a ratio versus, let's say, 16 meals you have at home, assuming 3 meals per day, 5 meals out per week, or half and half, like obviously, this is massively going to impact your results on the scale. Step 9 that helped me get in my best shape ever on a plant-based diet, I concede, I admit it, I've snuck one in here that isn't necessarily weight loss motivated. It's still a weight loss promoting food, but actually I'm more doing this for the nutrients, but it's another good rule. Remember with the berries, the 1 cup of berries early on. I like to aim for, though I'm not quite as compliant with this, I will concede, I like to aim for 2 cups of leafy greens daily. So kale, spinach, rocket, or arugula for my friends across the pond. What else? Things that I don't necessarily have, but I still think very highly of, like mustard greens, collard greens, these really nutrient-packed leafy greens. Now, if you don't like the taste of these things, totally understand. I don't always love them, but the hack is mix them into stuff, right? Throw them into your stir fries, into your lentil marinaras, your lentil bologneses. I found actually that with tomato-based sauce, that's how you say it properly, by the way, tomato, darling, not tomato. Tomato, darling. Tomato's quite an overpowering flavor, so what I do is sprinkle a couple of handfuls of spinach into my lentil bolognese. Hardly even notice the taste of it. Smoothies as well. Like, I've always had a bit of apprehension about doing that. I think I've done that 2 or 3 times in my life, thrown kale or spinach into a smoothie. But you can do this as well to kind of blend in the flavor. So there's little hacks to get these things in. You can always air fry or, of course, roast bake, some kale, make it all nice and crispy with a little bit of salt, maybe a little bit of lemon juice, a little bit of soy sauce or tamari. So there are ways around this to make them taste slightly more, they're not going to be the best thing in the world, but slightly more agreeable, let's say. But like I say, not necessarily weight loss motivated, though they are really low in calories. So again, it's not a weight gain promoting food. That's for damn sure one of the best, actually, in terms of having virtually 0 calories almost, many of these things per cup. But I'm more doing this for the nutrients, I concede. But it all contributes, doesn't it, to a diet that leaves you feeling nourished and satisfied, and makes you feel your best self and therefore less tempted to go for the McFlurries. Step number 10 that helps me lose weight on a plant-based diet. A lot of people don't believe me when I say that for months at a time, I've eaten this food daily or near daily and still looked on the scale every week and either maintained or lost my weight if I was in a weight loss phase at that time. It's bread, would you believe it? I know it's processed, full of all those carbs. I know you've heard terrible things about bread. I'm sure you've noticed weight gain in the past whilst you've been eating bread. Again, not to sound like a broken record on this, this is the big breakthrough, this is the big epiphany. And it's not profound, but people neglect this because they get lost in all the hacks and tactics and conflicting opinions about diet and weight loss they hear on the internet. When you're in a calorie deficit, it trumps all else. When you understand that it's simply about being in a calorie deficit, doing so consistently, obviously, and under that rule, you can actually eat what you want. It's not to say you should and that everything should be consumed, as long as it fits the calories, right? That's not what I believe. But I certainly think there is nothing too much wrong with a good quality, what do I mean by good quality? High fiber content, the calories aren't astronomical, and there aren't too many added ingredients. A good quality, whole wheat rye, sourdough bread. These are a huge part of my diet. Actually, not at the moment, incidentally, but like I said, there's been months at a time I've watched the scale drop each week eating bread because I've been in a calorie deficit. And of course, this is important as well. What are you eating on the darn bread? I think a lot of people blame bread. It becomes an easy scapegoat when actually the rest of their diet is astronomically bad. And again, if you're over-consuming on the calorie front, this is the false assumption a lot of people start developing, that they're just simply overeating. They're eating too many calories every single day, and they start looking at particular ingredients in their diet, like bread, or certainly like the carbohydrate sources are always a bit of a scapegoat for this, but they start pointing at those things and going, oh, I'm sure it's the fruit, I'm sure it's the 3 bananas I eat every day, oh, it must be the bread, that's the reason. No, you're just eating too many calories, mate. You understand that, you build a diet that is calorically sensible, and you realize I can still eat bread, I can still eat pasta, I can still eat fruit, and I can still drop body fat each week. So what I love about bread in particular, there's lots of other good carbohydrate sources. So I've got my oats here. I've talked extensively about potatoes over the years. Love them. I actually think they're probably the most weight loss friendly carbohydrate source. I do like my whole grains as well, but potatoes, that calorie to satisfaction ratio that I've spoken about several times in this video, unparalleled. That's a different tip for another day, but unparalleled, I think, amongst carbohydrate sources under the plant-based umbrella. But bread, what I like it for versus those other things, simplicity. And I think a diet that isn't simple, a diet plan that doesn't offer you some element of speed in a moment where you're really busy. Oh, I've got to cook my oats. You've got to cook your other carb sources. That might be 15, 20 minutes. Throw it in a Tupperware container. Take it out with you to work in the morning. What if you're late one morning? What if your kid's just thrown up everywhere and you rush? What if something has gone wrong and you need to get out of the house quickly and just grab something, and you know you're going to get Taco Bell if you don't grab something healthy here? Something like my chickpea salad sandwiches, the hummus and avocado wraps. The black bean avocado wrap is really popular on Vegan Slim and Sustain at the moment. Seitan wrap. If you could just throw something onto a bit of bread, even if it was just a light spreading of like a really clean nut butter, no added oil nut butter, a couple of slices of banana, like a healthy PB&J sandwich on a really clean rye bread. I love this stuff, and I think it can all absolutely fit into a weight loss friendly, so therefore calorically balanced, but weight loss friendly, health promoting diet. So long as the bread is of a relatively decent quality, and again, so long as each day, the important point, you're still finishing in a calorie deficit. And just bread is something that the simplicity, the flexibility that it offers allows me to really just stay consistent with plant-based eating, because I'm not going for other convenient. I haven't said this word yet. Bread, what you're getting with bread is you're getting convenience. Use it correctly. Try and not let it be a big trigger for you where you're having toast every 2 hours. Have it at your meal times only. Relegate yourself to, if you struggle with bread, to meal times only. Have healthy ingredients on the bread. This will all really help. Step number 11 then, it turns out that I lied to you at the start when I said there was 10 steps I want to walk you through today, because I've just thought, consider it your little bonus step. If you haven't had enough of my ramblings already in this one, here's 2 minutes more of me. Step 11 is this: don't stop. Right? The other 10 steps I've walked you through, they are utterly futile if you're really inconsistent. And I understand you failed with every other weight loss attempt, like I used to fail with every other weight loss attempt you've tried in the past, so there is a bit of a lack of this is what happens to people. I do have an empathy for it, but at the same time it is really disempowering, and I just want to shake people sometimes and say, bloody hell, don't be such a darn flake, right? Push through. Like, if you make a mistake, that first binge that happens, that first slip up on your diet, don't use that as an excuse to quit. Don't use that as a proof to your limiting beliefs and doubt. Oh, I was right. Actually, no, I'm really not cut out for this. I'm not strong enough for this. I can't be this disciplined. This diet won't work for me. Give it a fair shot, right? Get back on track from the next meal. Wobbles and slip-ups happen. I think I've been transparent throughout this video and saying, look, I'm not perfect with all of this stuff. These are my rules. I still don't adhere to them 100% of the time, because nobody's perfect with this stuff. But you get back on track, and you don't take little wobbles and mistakes as a sign that you're not destined for this, or that you should quit. You're always going to be a failure. People are very quick to get very, very doomsday. They might eat 18 good meals over the course of the week, have 2 or 3 bad ones over the weekend. That's a different problem to diagnose in a different video, the kind of weekend cheating. But let's say that's you. You've still had 18 good meals. Think how you were eating a couple of months ago. You're eating 3 healthy meals a week, right? So acknowledge the progress you're making, get back on track from that next meal, and that's how you build the staying power and the resilience that gives you 10 years. Case in point, not to sound too arrogant eating this way. And here's the final elephant in the room I want to leave you with. I would like to think that I've got authentic and original ideas, and I've shared at least 1 or 2 things today that you haven't heard before, you haven't heard it framed in the way that I framed it today. I would like to think that, but elephant in the room is, I know, because I've been you, I know you already know most of this stuff. This is not an information problem. You've watched the YouTube videos, you've read lots of the plant-based books, you've understood from maybe previous attempts how weight loss does actually work. You've probably done lots of this stuff I've shared today before, just not for long enough. And that's the point with the consistency aspect. And this is where Vegan Slim and Sustain comes in, because I've now coached over 600 vegans and plant-based dieters towards their ideal healthy body weight whilst eating simple, realistic, and satisfying plant-based meals. This is what I've done since 2019 on my coaching program. And so this is where it's different. It's not about information anymore. It's not just giving you little tips. It's now about giving you the support, the extreme accountability one-on-one with me personally. I don't do any outsourcing. You're working with me directly to make sure you actually stick to this game plan. So if you want some help from me personally to lose 4 to 8 pounds per month, eating, as I say, simple, satisfying, realistic plant-based meals until you get to your ideal healthy body weight range, and this time you actually learn how to sustain it, because it isn't some aggressive lose 10 pounds in the next week detox, juice cleanse, or any extreme version of a diet. If all of that interests you, click the link down below, go and learn more about my Vegan Slim and Sustain program there and exactly how I've helped 600 clients through this process. Fill out the form and I'll be in touch, very, very shortly with all the details for that program. Hope this helps. See you in the next vid.